Languages through music. Languages through music. Languages through music. Languages through music.
Welcome everybody to the Languages Through Music Africa special podcast, and amazing guest today, Auclair, representing Rwanda diaspora artistic musical magnificence. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me on. I am good. Yeah, I'm good. Surviving lockdown 2.0.
2.0, and no doubt being very productive about it. What are some of the wonderful projects you're working on this year?
This year, kind of specifically over the summer, fair few projects have come up, and it's been a real blessing to have them come through and be able to get creative, and also to connect with other artists as well. By virtue of having to isolate ourselves, it felt like it was a good time to do even more reaching out. So yeah, I worked on some music with in a trio that I'm part of, Blood Moon Project, with two other really amazing artists, Louisa Gerstein and Eloise Tunstall-Berens, and we do a lot of our music is based on polyphonic singing traditions mixed up with electronics. So we make music by kind of playing a game of consequences, and we agree a kind of framework for the composition. We write some stuff, then we send it to each other. We pass it. It's like pass the parcel. Consequences, where you make something and then pass it to the next person. They add their special spice, and then they pass it on to the next person, and they add their special spice. So yeah, we put out 2 singles earlier on in the summer. I got commissioned to write a new piece for the Riot Ensemble for solo bass clarinet, and that got premiered at Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival last month, and that piece is Munganiche is a Transformer, which I made in collaboration with Alcius Garrigos Morant and my ma.
Your ma and her story. That's incredible. That must have been a very emotional journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional and energetically so nuanced in different ways. You know, I was working with a story from my mother's childhood when she was fleeing Rwanda as a refugee from the genocide in the early 60s. So you can imagine it's a traumatic story, but there's also so much awe-inspiring courage and perseverance and resilience and creativity. And with that story, I was really inspired by my mother's ability to transform, not just in the course of the story in order to survive, but the way that she transforms what could have been a really horrible situation into something that is deeply inspiring. So in the course of working with her story, working with her voice, I was also really excited about exploring the cadence and rhythm and inherent music and melodies within her voice, which has been the underscore to my life, really, you know, and I was really excited about exploring that. So that was great, because at the same time as the content being, you know, challenging in lots of ways emotionally, there was also this really exciting journey that I could take into my mother's voice, metaphorically as well as literally. And yeah, it was brilliant working with Alcius. He's an incredible musician. It was great to work with my ma for the first time.
Yeah, beautiful. and rhythm is something that comes out in so much of your work. So whether it's, you know, the choir, or whether it's the trio, percussion for you, has been there since the beginning, no? Since you trained, and then your recent trip to Rwanda with that amazing women's group. Tell me a bit about how rhythm has featured for you.
It's always been there, you know, like neither of my parents are musicians, but they're both massive fans of music. And growing up, there was always lots and lots of music in the house. And it was a mix of like rock and roll from my dad, and then like Atlantic soul from my ma, along with bootleg tapes from markets in Kinshasa that she managed, friends would send over, and Congolese high life and soukous. And so all of it, I think when you're growing up around people who put a lot of importance and value and cherish music every day, you know, and show you physically, you know, like my parents would dance with me, and you know, and that kind of enthusiasm definitely rubbed off on me, and I started learning music relatively early, but didn't come to like a dedicated rhythm practice until I went to university, and a friend of mine, Yara, introduced me to some West African percussion and djembe, and I started learning. And then I found a teacher from Nigeria who I studied with. I was his apprentice for a couple of years, learning everything I could from him. And then around that time I started learning electric bass, and that's inherently got its own, you know, the relationship of bass to drums and beats to them is so intrinsic. So that relationship, I started to get into that. Then I went to the States to work with a really, really amazing jazz musician, drummer. Well, he came from the jazz tradition, but then like pushed out into all sorts of directions. A guy called Leon Parker. I studied with him for about 6 months. And with him, I was learning lots of kind of extended techniques of body percussion and creating music out of unconventional instruments and objects and stuff. And I got really into that, and that stayed with me. Actually, I think a lot of my beats and my rhythms are often I'm really into unconventional sounds, and can then become a kick drum or a snare. What would normally take the place of a kick drum or snare. But then, I also love the old drum machines. I grew up in West London, you know, where broken beat and jungle and drum and bass and funk and everything, like the soul funk revival was coming through in the 90s and 2000s. And it's just like, and techno as well. So I love all of those sounds and mixing them all together. But then obviously with this grounding in Rwandan rhythm practice and an appreciation for, you know, rhythms from all over Africa. But a big part of my learning was rooted in working with the West African, Nigerian musicians. And then I just carried on learning bits wherever I could. And then fast forward to last year, and I had the good fortune and to like be able to connect with Ngomasha, who are an incredible ensemble of women who are the first group of women to drum in Rwanda. So they took on the traditional drums, learnt all of the traditional rhythms, and some that came from Burundi as well, where the tradition for drumming is very, very strong. And I think a lot of Rwanda's drumming came from there in different ways, and got adapted. But I spent a week with them, blew my mind, and was like a real homecoming for me, because up until that point, like I said, like I'd been studying, you know, I listened to lots of Afro-Brazilian music, Angolan music, working with a Nigerian drummer, yeah, picking up everything that I could around me growing up in West London too. But the big piece that was missing was being able to connect with the rhythm language from my own culture. And I picked up CDs here and there, you know, as you do. But Rwanda's a tiny country, and it was ripped apart by genocide, and a lot of the old culture, the musical culture, was quashed and disappeared. You know, my mom wasn't allowed to speak Kinyarwanda. You know, that in itself shows you that, you know, a culture gets rinsed by conflict. Genocide in that way. So it was hard to get hold of the music, and I'd find CDs here and there. I pick them up and try and absorb them, but it's complex music, and you have to go to the source, don't you? So spend a week with them. Oof.
Yeah, and the videos I saw from your experience there, the physicality of it, the dancing, the stories, it just must have been mind-blowing.
I walked in, Kiki, the artistic director, introduces me to the whole group. I walked in, and the company were doing a demonstration to show, you know, like, because at the same time they had a summer school that they were running for young girls, young women from like 3 years old up to 17 or 18, and they were training them in dance and drumming. And so they were doing a demonstration of some pieces that they wanted to show me to choose from. I walked in and they were drumming, and my heart, it was like you know, I'd been back once before, but that felt like another kind of homecoming for me. Of course. Yeah, it blew my mind, the joy and the energy that they transmit, the joyous energy that they transmit through their music, and the complexity of the rhythms and the ways in which because a drumming ensemble in Rwanda, there's different drums that have very specific roles. They have very clear specific roles in a piece. So you have the bass, lower drums, you've got the middle drums, and then you've got higher drums, and then you've got one specific one that's like a heartbeat drum that keeps the pulse that everyone like aligns with, and then you've got the soloist drums and the ways in which they would communicate with each other and then transmit that energy out. It was phenomenal, and I think that was a big part of what I was excited about exploring, was the ways in which they integrate movement as well. So there's like all this beautiful choreography that goes with it.
So gorgeous, so elegant, so beautiful. Yeah, beautiful to watch, and must be very difficult to do, to make it all look so smooth and graceful.
Believe I every day I would film myself, or, you know, film, because I was learning by ear. They'd show me, the women would show me, I would play it back. They would tell, you know, they would correct me, and I keep trying it, and I have to remember it by ear and learn it by heart, and then go back the next day and add on another section. So every day I was doing that, and the piece was 11 minutes long. So I was like trying to learn this piece by heart, by ear, because my Kinyarwanda is it's very, very minimal so far, for now anyway. And their English and French was quite minimal too. So it's all through speaking, singing the rhythms, and showing each other. And yeah, it was physically really demanding, really, and mentally very, very challenging. But there's something really amazing about pushing yourself in that way.
Absolutely, and the learning that you get from it too. How has, if at all, music helped you learn the languages that you've studied?
Yeah, well, I speak French fluently, and a part of that was definitely being immersed in the musicality of that language too, and being immersed, I think, connecting with that, especially growing up in a family who, well, you know, for Ma, English is her second language, and her creativity with a second language or a learned language, I think that definitely rubbed off on me. And I think we learned there's an inherent music in all languages that we tap into.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I learned French, I did years of study, but it wasn't until I lived there and I was surrounded by the music of those voices and the music on the radio and watching films and like the music in the scores. And at the first kind of proper work experience thing I did in France, I was just listening to the radio all day and working in a shoe shop, and it was mad how much I picked up in a week. So yeah, I think that music definitely was part of that. Also, when I lived in France, I reached out to other musicians in my neighborhood and started jamming with them and singing stuff where I could, learning some French songs.
Do you have? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and then I was going to say, just like I took the Brazilian Portuguese course as well.
At South Bank, I remember that.
Such a dream. And that stayed with me, you know, that really stayed with me.
Yeah, I think once you know what a song means, it's almost impossible to forget some of those words that you learn, because whenever you hear that song again, you remember those words, right? For me, I'm still struggling with Tigrinya, but that's the idea. Do you have any favorite Kinyarwanda songs?
No, not yet. I'm on a real journey with it. Like I said, it was quite hard to access music for a long time.
Yeah.
So I don't have any favorites. But it's been really wonderful having you invite me to be part of this, because it's really encouraged me and invited me to explore that more. So I've started to look more into Rwandan pop music.
Yeah, I'm so glad, because I feel, being in diaspora, being linked to the country, but linked to our other countries, but, also as I was speaking with Thierry and Sabrina Yadede, we're not generally really that supported in learning those languages, sometimes even while we're there, let alone abroad. And that can be really hard to, the struggle I had finding Tigrinya classes in London, even with the zillions of Abasha there. So yeah, I'm really happy about this project with BOZAR because I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of us between our countries home and our countries here, trying to maintain those connections, and it's not always easy. So with this project, I really hope to connect a lot of people and co-create with everyone a lot of resources, so people discover artists and discover their music and discover the language too. It takes a village. It takes a village to raise a language.
It really does. And only just yesterday I was talking to my ma, and she was talking about, so she's going to move back to Rwanda next year, and she was talking about learning the language again and how she's going to be roping the nephews and cousins in to help. And because in reality, when you live away from your home, she had to leave when she was a child.
Yeah,
they weren't allowed to speak it at school. So actually, in terms of language, that wasn't a language that she was using every day from the age of 12 or 13. And then being a refugee, you need to adapt super quick. So you're picking up whatever, Lingala, Swahili, all sorts of different, more French, bits of English. And when she came to London, obviously, so that adaptability also means sometimes you have to let go. And the Rwandan diaspora is very, very scattered. She didn't really know any other Rwandan people until many, many years later.
Yeah.
So if that's, when your language becomes disrupted like that, taken away, disrupted, then your relationship to it becomes tricky.
Tenuous.
I reprimanded her for not teaching me, from bringing me up bilingual, and she's like, well, I wasn't speaking it either, so yeah, it was like, oh yeah, of course. So yeah, I think she's really excited about relearning. I'm really excited about learning, although it's a really difficult language. I realized that.
I'm telling you, Tigrinya, I was thinking of it today, like literally, I think there's a saying, like, humans plan and God laughs. And I really feel like Desta plans and Tigrinya laughs, because I've been studying it for years and I feel like I still get nowhere. But, we keep on keeping on.
But isn't it interesting? I feel like you've got such a specific kind of cadence and musicality in your voice that I don't know if it's entirely rooted in the languages you speak, or the languages that, even though you don't speak Tigrinya fluently, I wonder if there's some musicality from that language that's just in your body.
I don't know. It was funny. I met this Eritrean guy this summer, Bereket, lovely dude, and he was like, "Wow, you sound just like my aunties." And I was like, "What do you mean? How so?" And he said that's such an Eritrean thing. You do the and then there are some sounds in languages like to say yes. A lot of Abasha go
yes,
like this little intake of breath, and sometimes I catch myself doing it, and I just see this look of like a perplexed person I'm talking to, and and then you have to remember that those sounds don't always translate. But I have
language. It's so magic.
Yeah, it says a lot. It says a lot, and anything we can do to keep those links or discover those links we don't know are links but are there. So I have a last question for you. It's not musically related. Your beekeeping. I don't know any beekeepers in the world, and I think it's such a cool thing. And I didn't know at all until I went to visit Rwanda last year that beekeeping was actually quite a big thing in Rwanda.
Yes.
So did you know that before you started, or was that something you found out later? Curious.
Oh, yeah, I did know that from my first trip. I was already very interested in bees, and at that point I wasn't keeping bees in London, but I had done some volunteering with a beekeeper, and when I went to Rwanda, I was super curious about how they keep bees, their like practices.
Yeah.
And one day we stopped off by the side of the road and picked up a bottle of honey that had been distilled into some old secondhand Kahlua bottle or something, and it was like food of the gods and goddesses. It was unbelievably dreamy. Anyway, as we were traveling around, I noticed beehives that were strung up in eucalyptus trees, and started to investigate more and ask around about practices in it. There's like a really ancient practice of keeping bees, creating hives using a mix, I think, of cow dung and some different kinds of leaves, and then binding it all up and then stringing them up in trees. That's as far as I know. And then I think there's some other traditions where you have like almost like long, almost like a trunk, not a tree trunk, but a wooden long box, and that's like a really very specialist form of keeping bees that I think is quite popular out there. But I'm excited about meeting some beekeepers out there next time I'm at them.
Yeah, and doing more music out there. So
yes,
please give us all your links so anybody listening to the podcast can check out the eclectic, amazing music you're doing and producing and singing, and Murakoze Chane, which is the extent of my Kinyarwanda, for being on the Languages to Music Africa special podcast. And we hope we can invite you to a live Zoom Q&A for the Afropolitan forum to join with the other artists representing Rwanda and her diaspora. So thank you so much.
Murakoze cyane.
Murakoze cyane. Okay.
Amasiganalu?
Amasiganalu in Amharic, Uwe, and in Tigrinya it is Ye'enyele.
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 Ye'enyele. Nice. That's so wicked. Ye'enyele.
Ye'enyele. It's all right for one word, but when the whole language is like that challenging, it's heavy.
Ye'enyele.
We're gonna make a song.
Languages to